Congratulations to everyone who got longlisted. I know now you guys are waiting for the outcome of the shortlisting. I'm making this video to let you guys know how I prepared for the STP interview and also share my best tips to help you guys prepare for your own interview as well. Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Cynthia. I'm a first-year trainee clinical scientist on the NHS STP in cancer genomics. If you're coming across my channel for the first time, you're welcome. Remember to click the subscribe button and also give this video a thumbs up. So let's get right into the video. So here is my experience on the STP interview process. So when I got shortlisted, we were asked to rank our location. I went to Oriel and ranked all my locations. I just picked places I was willing to go to. And after that, I started preparing for the interview. I prepared for 3 major types of questions: specialty related questions, competency-based questions, and questions around NHS core value and NHS constitution. For specialty-related questions, I went back to research on the basic information I needed to know about the specialty. I researched the specialty in and out to understand everything about it. So for this part of the video, I'm strictly talking about how I prepared. So everything I'll be talking about right now will be on cancer genomics, but it can be transferred to any other specialty. So for specialty-related questions, I needed to know everything about cancer. Of course, cancer happened as a result of cells growing out of control. So I went back to read about mitosis, meiosis. I needed information about the DNA. Cancer has a lot to do with the DNA, the genome. I needed to know what the genome was, the gene. I read around these things just to have the basic knowledge in case questions come around this, so I'll be able to understand it. And also, it helps me to understand the specialty better. Then I prepared for technical questions. So I needed to know the techniques they use in cancer genomics. So how do they diagnose cancer? How do they determine that a patient has cancer? So since cancer has a lot to do with the gene, what do they do in the specialty? How do clinical scientists determine when a patient has cancer? So I read about PCR, I read about FISH, I read about karyotyping, I read about microarrays, I read about next generation sequencing. These are techniques that are used in cancer genomics. So I read the principles, I read how these techniques work. Some of these techniques I already knew about them, like the PCR. I used it during my master's, so I just needed to refresh my knowledge. And for the cancer related questions, I knew some of those things, but I needed to refresh my knowledge on them. I didn't go to any textbook. I didn't spend forever on Google researching anything. I just went to YouTube. I'm good with videos, and there are very lovely videos out there on YouTube. So I just watched them to refresh my memory. So if you're talking about cancer, there are basic terms you need to understand and familiarize yourself with. So I went back to understand those things. I mentioned them earlier. And then for the competency-based questions, I went back to the core person specification for the STP. I looked at those core person spec that they were going to assess during the interview. So if you look at them, you'll see the ones that have to do with interview. So those are majorly transferable skills like communication skills, teamwork, leadership skills. I prepared for examples of when I've demonstrated those skills. I prepared for example to show how I have good communication skill, good leadership skill. I prepared example a time that I've worked as part of a team. So I just prepared for this type of scenario based questions because I've experienced an NHS interview before. Their interviews are not straightforward. They can never ask you what is cancer. They can never ask you what is this or what is that. They'll majorly ask you, how do you do this? Tell me about a time where you've done this. So I prepared for those type of questions. Then for the NHS core value and NHS constitution, of course, I went back online and researched on that. But if you take me back, I also prepare examples of how I demonstrate the NHS core value and the NHS constitution. They didn't ask me to list it, and I doubt if they are going to ask anyone to list it. But bear it in mind that they'll be expecting you to tell them about a time where you demonstrate the NHS core value. And just a bonus tip for those of you that will be working behind the scene, you're not working with patients. So how do you demonstrate the NHS core value, or how do you think you'll be able to demonstrate the NHS core value in your role? Let me give you an example of a very weird one. How do you show compassion? Since your role is behind the scene, how would you be able to show compassion to patients? think about it and try to figure out how you'll be able to answer that question. Or let's say respect and dignity, or working together for patient. Just pick any NHS core value and try to think about how they demonstrate or reflect that core value in your specialty. Then during the interview, I had about 6 questions. So the first questions were around the specialty, and then I had competency based questions. Then I also had questions around NHS core value and NHS constitution. But let me tell you this, my first question threw me off balance here. So I had to take a second to catch my breath. I was preparing for the regular interview question of tell me about yourself. Right before the interview started, I was memorizing what I was going to say. Although the question threw me off balance, I took a second to catch my breath. Then I answered the question. But honestly, I don't think I answered that question the way I would have loved to do it. That's because the first question came to me as a shock. So I'm sharing this with you guys to have it at the back of your mind that the interview might not be like any regular interview. So prepare for scenario-based questions. Prepare to use examples to demonstrate the core person specification of the STP that will be assessed during the interview, and also the NHS core value and the NHS constitution. My interview was online via Microsoft Teams. So I was asked to turn my camera around. They wanted to see my room. They needed to confirm that there was no other person in the room. They needed to confirm I didn't have notes lying around. So I'm giving you guys this as a bonus tips. Make sure your room is clean. It might be embarrassing if everywhere is messed up and you're asked to flip your camera around and you're embarrassed to show them your room, so, or wherever you're having your interview. So I would advise you to find a quiet place, have good internet connection, prepare to show them your room to confirm that no one else is there and you don't have any notes. So I'm just letting you guys know all this. This was just how my interview went, how I prepared for the interview, what I did before the interview, if that will help you guys with your preparations. So now that I've told you about how I prepared and everything that happened during my interview and around my interview, now that I'm a trainee, let me share my best tips with you guys. So what motivated your application to your specialty? Why did you apply to that particular specialty? Why did you apply to cancer genomics? Why are you applying to cardiac science? Why are you applying to neurophysiology? So prepare to answer these type of questions. So what is your motivation for applying to your specialty? I think they asked you guys that question for your supporting information. So rehearse that question again. So what is your motivation for applying to your specialty? And also, what is your motivation for applying to the STP? Understand the role perfectly. Understand the role of a clinical scientist, as well as understand your specialty very well. What do they do? How do they do it? So again, let's talk about cancer genomics. So how do they diagnose cancer? So if you're applying for cancer genomics and someone asks you, how is cancer diagnosed? Would you be able to answer that question? If you're applying for cardiac science and a patient show up in the hospital with heart issues, what role do clinical scientists in cardiac science play in the life of that patient? If a patient has cancer and they're trying to diagnose the patient, or if someone has rare diseases, what role do clinical scientists play? Now, a clinical scientist in cancer genomics or any other specialty is not a technician or a lab assistant. They don't run the test. They don't do wet lab work. I think I've said this during your application, and I'm saying it again because if you get to the interview and you are asked a question about the role of a clinical scientist and you start saying they run tests, no, they don't run the test. Research the role properly to understand what they do. What role do clinical scientists play in the patient pathway? So a patient comes to the hospital trying to, maybe they are sick, they've come to see the doctor. So patient pathway, what is patient pathway? Throughout their stay and everything they do in the hospital, where do clinical scientists come in? So research that and understand it perfectly. Again, for specialty like genomics, we have genomics, cancer genomics, clinical bioinformatics genomics. These specialties are not the same. So in cancer genomics, understand how they diagnose cancer and the techniques they use to do it. In genomics, what rare diseases do they look at? Cystic fibrosis and those type of diseases. Know those diseases and the technique they use to diagnose each disease. If you're talking about clinical bioinformatics, what do clinical scientists in this specialty do? So if you're talking about analyzing large biological data, how do they do it? What pipeline do they use? You need to understand those things. This is a training position. They are not expecting you to know everything, but they're expecting you to have an idea. So if you're going into bioinformatics and you're asked a question about what is the role of a clinical bioinformatician in the life of a patient, you should be able to answer that. So you need to understand the role in and out. And in answering that, you need to understand the techniques they use, how they do it, and how they carry out their role. So if we're talking about, let's say, medical physics, I know they do a lot of radiation safety. They do a lot of making sure the devices are safe and all that. How do they do that? So these are things you should be researching on. You shouldn't be giving maybe very shallow answers. You should be giving examples. So let's say you are asked how to diagnose cancer, rather than saying they come to the hospital and rather than just blabbing, when you know the specific examples and you say it, the interviewers know that you understand what you are talking about. Let me use cancer genomics as an example. So if you're asked how do you diagnose cancer, rather than blabbing, you just go straight to the point. So of course, you can't just use one technique to determine if a patient has cancer or not. But when you come to cancer genomics, you need to understand the technique we use. We have FISH, we have karyotyping, microarray, PCR, qPCR. So read up on those techniques and be ready to use them to make examples. Be ready to talk about them. What is next generation sequencing? Just do your basic research, and if any question come around it, trust me, you'll be able to answer it. Next, I would advise you guys to visit the core person specification for the STP. So check the ones that will be assessed by interview. Prepare examples of how you meet this core person specification. I can't say exactly how these questions will come, but I would advise you to prepare examples of how you demonstrate the skills. Tell me about a time where you've worked as part of a team. Tell me about a time where you've demonstrated good leadership skills. Tell me about a time where you led a project successfully. I don't know how the question will come, but I'm just giving you an idea. So they are scenario-based questions, not regular what is this or what is that question. So you get what I mean, right? Prepare for specialty specific questions. So if you don't know the answer around the question, rather than blabbing or rather than maybe just keeping quiet and you just say you don't know, I would advise you to maybe reason around the question. Here is what I mean. So you're a scientist and they're also assessing how you think. It's a scientist training program, so they're also assessing if you're able to think like a scientist. I had a question I didn't know as well, but I didn't just keep quiet. And if you keep quiet without answering a question, or if you just tell them you don't know, it might affect you. You might feel like you've already failed the interview. You're already panicking about what the outcome of the interview would be. So rather than say you don't know, I would advise you to take a deep breath and try to attempt the question. Let's answer the question using a random disease different from my specialty and just showing you guys how I would approach it. So how do you diagnose a cardiac condition? When a patient comes to the hospital with heart issues, I know that there are blood tests, I know that there are cardiac markers that are tested in the lab. I know that we have D-dimer and some other heart-related tests that they run in the lab. I know that they have echo, they have some heart tests. So right now, I don't know the answer to this question, but I can't just tell them I don't know. So I'll just start from somewhere, start with the beats. And I also tell you that sometimes if you're not saying the right answer, I had that experience. I started saying something that wasn't the answer, and they kind of called my attention and they rephrased the question. The interviewers were really kind to me, honestly. They rephrased the question, and that gave me an idea of, oh yeah, this is what they want and not this, and I answered the question correctly. So sorry about the cardiac science example. I don't know if what I said is correct, but just giving you guys an example of how to start answering the question rather than telling them you don't know. So if you're still watching this video to this point, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Let's continue. At the end of my interview, they asked me if I have any question for them, and I saw some tips online and on the pages of some trainees where they asked us to prepare a question to ask them. So for me, I knew the trust that would be interviewing me, so I kind of did a little bit of research about the trust, and the trust was also my first choice location. Prepare for questions so that not when they ask you any question for us, you say no. I don't know if you'll be scored, but maybe for impression's sake, don't just say no, ask them a question. Another bonus tip I'd like you guys know is you are free to ask for clarification. So if they ask a question and you need clarification, you can ask them. For me, I had a question that was in two parts, like this and that. So I answered this, then I forgot what they wanted me to say in that, so I had to ask for clarification. Please, can you repeat this? And yeah, they repeated the question, then I remembered and asked them. And again, I also use that to maybe think about a response I want to give. Don't do that too much, it might become too much. But if you just need a second to put your thoughts together, you can say, sorry, can you just like kind of clarify something, and giving yourself some seconds to just put your thoughts together. Then finally, guys, if you made it to this point, it means they see a potential in you. The year before us, their interview was not competitive, but ours was competitive, and I promised myself I didn't come this far to just drop out on this interview. I should have dropped out maybe at the first stage, but to have waited through the pain of the STP waiting period to this point, there's nothing that will make me not to pass through. So I gave it my all. I practiced interview questions with family members, and I asked them to assess my response. I was in front of the mirror. I was preparing and getting used to my responses. In the shower, I was memorizing my answers. Someone said it's not good to prepare too much, but guys, if I wasn't preparing, it felt I wasn't getting ready. I had to take leave from work because I needed to be mentally ready. I tried to like sleep and not prepare so much, but it felt like you are here sleeping and others are preparing. I know it sounds crazy, and I was just reading things around the specialty. I read so many things about cancer, guys, and because you're not sure where your question will be coming from, and of course, as a trainee, I can't tell you the exact questions that will be asked. I don't even think I remember the questions, but anyway, just read as much as you can. If you think you need a break, just take a break. But if it makes you feel better, please keep reading. So that's it, guys. This is all I can think of for now. If you want me to talk about any particular part of the interview, or if you have any question you want me to address, drop it in the comment section or DM me on Instagram. Guys, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. I wish you all the best. I pray you all get shortlisted. I don't know how possible that is, but I pray you get shortlisted, and I wish you the best in your interview. Thank you very much. Click the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, follow me on Instagram and TikTok, STP with Cynthia. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you in my next one. Bye.